Operation Truth. The show they don't want you to see. Now, here's your host, Lou.
This is Lou Palumbo, and with me as always is my co-host, Tom Fuentes. Just to remind you of Tom's background, which is clearly relevant to everything you listen to. Tom is a former assistant director of the FBI with almost 30 years of service. Some of Tom's responsibilities were to oversee the FBI's international operation, which was massive, to put it to you politely. He also headed up organized crime. And if you listened to last week's podcast, and we're trying to figure out why you may not have, Tom mentioned he had been a site commander at some of these locations where the Secret Service was present with the protectee. I want to bump into this Secret Service discussion again. To everyone from the Secret Service that's doing these shows for Fox and MSNBC and CNN, critical of your organization, why don't you just stop talking? Number one, if we're going to talk truthful to this conversation and explain why we've denigrated the Secret Service, and they didn't do it to themselves, we're gonna hit on a different nerve here. First of all, let me say something to you. Back in the 70s, when Tom and I both started law enforcement, there were two crown jewels, as I refer to them, in law enforcement. The FBI, which is an organization that there is no finer as far as investigators go. Their laboratories are second to none. And I always jokingly say, it isn't if they get you, it's when. And they never fail me. They always get you. The Secret Service was another discussion. It was a little more, I would say, on the low-key side, but it was a crown jewel. It was almost impossible to get into this agency. Today, if you can see lightning and hear thunder, you can get into this agency. Here is the truth of the discussion if you want to know why we're having this critique of the Secret Service today. Back around 1984, they changed their pension system. At one time, we're in the D.C. Metro pension system, which was comparable to law enforcement on a local level. 20-year half-pay retirement, full medical benefits, et cetera, which was quite attractive. For whatever reason, our legislators decided to change that because they somehow rationalized that those of us in law enforcement are not entitled to having something that we earn. This is a tough business. Tom can tell you he was a police officer as well as an FBI agent. I've been in this community over 50 years. I was a law enforcement agent in New York. I've had a rather interesting career where I branched out post-formal, I would say, enrollment to working for our government at times. And I've been in the private sector for 44 years, to put this in perspective for you. I got in by accident through a friend of mine, Jim Motherway, who was a retired lieutenant from the Manhattan North Initiative, which is a narcotics program. That's all you need to know for now about that. Crown jewel of law enforcement. You couldn't get in this job. 1984, we started chipping away, folks. We started to assault their pension system. Shortly thereafter, they took them out of Treasury and they put them into Homeland Security. And I want to ask Tom this question in a moment about the Secret Service being in Homeland Security, responsible for the safety of this nation, but not the FBI. And I do think I might have an understanding why, and it has to do with the uniqueness of the FBI, which, by the way, I want to tell you exists with the Secret Service. It is perhaps the most unique law enforcement agency of its type. They do some investigations, not like the FBI does. The FBI has their hand in everything, and I mean domestically and foreign. And I suspect foreign with limitations because of charter, but Tom can talk to you more intelligently than I can in regards to that. The reality of it is we have denigrated this agency. We took them out of Treasury. They needed their uniqueness. They are mission specific, unlike any other law enforcement agency we know today in this country and perhaps worldwide. We commingled them in Homeland Security, not the end of the world. Here's the fly in the ointment, ladies and gentlemen. After 9/11, their security details, as I understand it, more than doubled. They didn't double the size of the agency. I said to you in the last podcast, part of the problems with this job today, you're a married man, you can pretty much count on destroying your marriages. You go on the road, 2-3 weeks, sometimes longer with these protectees. By the way, I wonder if the president or whomever they are protecting don't realize they've got the same guy for 2 or 3 weeks and they go, guys, how the hell are you doing this with your wife and kids? You're missing birthdays, Christmas, sporting events, et cetera, et cetera. And you know what? Tom will tell you that happens to the FBI too. Happens to everyone in law enforcement, including police officers. But not to the magnitude of frequency as it does with the Secret Service. They have little or no concern about their personal lives. How could all of our legislators and all our elected officials that are protected by these men and women not see this? This is nonsense. You're rotisserie, I'm going to say this, you're trying to rotisserie the Secret Service right now over this incident in Pennsylvania that they have taken full responsibility for. And I remind you what Tom said in the last podcast as having been a site commander. It's not as easy as everybody thinks. They need a significant amount more of agents and resources in various forms. You want to know where the failure is? The Secret Service has acknowledged the failure. The failure is once again systemic of this government. I've been saying this. I can't tell you for how long they need to double the size of this agency. I have worked alongside of them. They have brought protectees into my events, like former President Reagan, the First Lady Hillary Clinton, et cetera, et cetera. I brought people I protect, one of whom is a head of state, to events at the Waldorf Astoria years in a row when the president was there. I know what they're doing out there. This is a tough profession, but I'm tired of listening to everybody run their mouth about the mistakes the Secret Service made. The first mistake was our elected officials and our government as a whole did not properly staff this agency with these men and women. That's the truth. Now, let me point out something else too that I bumped into. It's been reported, and you got to take it from the source because the root of our problem today in this country deals with the media. 22 Secret Service agents present, 16 from Homeland Security, not Secret Service agents, not mission specific, don't do this day in and day out. And by the way, you have a unique bar you have to meet to be in the Secret Service, including polygraphing. So they're hiring people that we don't quite know what standards they're being held to. Again, I'm not going to be critical. I'm just throwing this out there as food for thought. Then we had, as it's been reported, 30 to 40 Pennsylvania state troopers, which is an excellent law enforcement agency, don't specialize in protection work. They do cover the protection for the governor of the state, Shapiro in this instance, but they do not have that broad stroke the Secret Service has. Then they had 7 officers from Butler County, I believe it is, or Butler's municipality, doing traffic control, and one sniper who, by the way, was reported he took a shot and missed. So why does the Secret Service have to walk into a scenario where they're dependent upon other people to work at the standard they work? You're bringing them into these jobs with one hand tied behind their back. If we're going to analyze and be critical of this organization, this agency, take a look at the big picture, ladies and gentlemen. Everybody should close their mouths and stop talking. I know you smell blood. I know this culture intimately. That's why I'm so goddamn good at what I do for a living on many aspects. I know exactly, I can predict exactly what you're going to do. Tom, I'd like you to comment on what I just said. And as Tom mentioned in the last podcast, he's been the site commander for the FBI, and he spoke to how complicated and convoluted this can be. You have the floor, Tom.
Okay, well, we'll start with that aspect of whoever got placed in charge of being the commander at the scene, which would be for the entire event. It's not the director of the Secret Service. She would have designated one of her top officials. You're the on-scene commander. They would start holding their meetings for this venue maybe about 5 days in advance and try to get all of the Secret Service, all of Department of Homeland Security people that might be providing assistance, other federal agencies that might be providing manpower, and Pennsylvania State Police, the county police of all the different counties in that area, the city police. So you could end up in a situation like this where you're going to be in charge of the 250 to 300 law enforcement officers that are going to protect the protectee, in this case, the candidate for president and ex-president Donald Trump. And that protection would start from the second in the morning when Trump would leave whatever residence he was in, go to the airport, get on his plane. They'd have to protect that whole scene, that he can get on his own plane safely. Then the plane lands, and they have to take him down the stairs of the plane to a waiting motorcade. And then that motorcade goes to the venue. And then at the venue, they have security requirements for the entire scene, where the speech is going to be, for the thousands of people that are going to attend, what kind of people are going to provide security for that. Now, several years ago, in 2020, for example, when Trump was a candidate, I went to 2 of his rallies. the magnetometers at the actual venue were manned by TSA. They took these guys from running security at the airports to running security for people entering the venue for that particular rally. But in this case, you have the on-scene commander needs to know what are all the vulnerabilities? What's the site survey? What are all the buildings that could pose a threat? What are all the locations? Who is assigned to those locations? How's that going to be? How are they going to be able to communicate with each other? How does that work?
Tom, can I interject something?
Yes.
Because Tom just pointed out something that's very, very interesting. Normally, when the magnetometers are set up, and I'm not going to speak to the technology and how backwards it is, those are manned by the Uniform Division of the Secret Service under the supervision of a special agent. This rally in Pennsylvania, we're hearing TSA was screening. This is an extremely high-profile, controversial. I don't even know how to quantify Donald Trump anymore. This is getting ridiculous. I do hear that they were within supervision of the Secret Service, but Tom just touched on something about who's handling the mags. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, it isn't the Secret Service. And if they make a mistake, they want the Secret Service to inherit that mistake. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Tom.
Because they're responsible. This is like the captain of the ship that runs the ship aground. He might be sleeping in his quarters, not his fault. So he may not be at fault, but he's responsible. And the Secret Service has responsibility for the protection of whoever they designate as protectee, in this case, Donald Trump. Now, this week, they're going to also be protecting Netanyahu. Secret Service is responsible for the protection of heads of state from around the world. You just had the G7 in Washington. Now you're going to have Netanyahu. They're responsible for that. So they can't just delegate away. They can delegate away people being at the scene or providing assistance. They cannot delegate responsibility to other agencies or other commanders. So the head Secret Service agent designated as the on-scene commander is in charge of every law enforcement officer that's going to work that event, as I mentioned, from following Trump in the morning until putting him to bed later that night. But during the venue of the rally, they are exclusively in command of every building, the entire venue, setting the perimeter of how far the perimeter is. Now, in the age of high-powered rifles, these guys, a trained sniper can kill somebody at 1,000 yards, much less 100 yards like this guy was. So you have the danger factor extends way beyond the immediate crowd in front of the speaker like they have here. So that's another issue. Now, it sounds like when reports were going to the command post, which means the on-scene commander, wherever he was, it would have been close to the venue, that commander would be getting reports there's a suspicious guy on the ground running around, which turns out to be the shooter. Now, at that point, they should have stopped Trump from going on stage until that's resolved. Find that guy, figure out who he is. So they don't figure it out. They finally figure out he's a bad guy when he opens fire and physically wounds Trump and kills another person, seriously wounding a third person. So that's when they find out, gee, the guy's a bad guy. What do you know? So that's a complete lapse, not in the whole setup. Now, the setup would also be declare all the sites that could pose, a person could go and pose a threat to the protectee, like rooftops. And then resolve any sighting of a suspicious person. Who is that person? Who do they work for? Now, in this situation, very difficult as the on-scene commander to determine when every suspicious person, how do you know if it's a police officer or not? Good guy or bad guy? Now, one of the things, years ago, they came up with the idea that the FBI would have their blue windbreaker jackets with FBI on the back, and then DEA did that. When Homeland Security formed HSI, Homeland Security Investigations, they got those blue windbreaker jackets with HSI on the back, and they went to a couple major, cast of thousands situations, and nobody knew who they were. Police officers didn't know, who are these guys? What's HSI stand for? So then they eliminated that. And a lot of the other agencies that don't have as common a name as FBI or DEA or ATF even, they get windbreakers that just say police. So at least the other agents from all these other agencies would have some idea that the person might be a good guy. Now, it was reported, this all has to be verified and may never be, that the good guy counter snipers, the Secret Service counter snipers on their roof, looking at Crooks on his rooftop, Crooks had already been reported as a suspicious person. They're radioing into the command post, who is this guy? Can you identify, is he a good guy or a bad guy? And apparently, they never really got an answer. Nobody really knew who to communicate with, how to identify him, how to ask that question of, the other commanders that are assisting the on-scene commander. They got their answer when Crooks opened fire.
Tom, can I interject something? Tom once again brought up a very interesting point that we're wearing raid jackets. FBI has them. Secret Service has them. Homeland Security has them. The butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker. Some say police. Here's the problem, guys. You want to know the truth be told? You can buy these jackets. I happen to have one, purpose of which is to avoid being accidentally shot by my own people, even though I'm in retired status. That's my logic and my reasoning. These jackets are available. Let me tell you something about the additional identification that they make you do in the city of New York. In uniform, you must wear your ID card. That's how concerned we are. So Tom just brought to your attention something that's really interesting. We have a large number of people convened in one location wearing raid jackets, for example. You need a scorecard to tell the players out here, guys. The thing I want to say to you that you need to understand, until the government, the Congress, and I have to tell you, I heard today in the hearings from the FBI director, Cheadle, who's not doing very well because she seems to be able to...
No, Secret Service Director Cheadle. Don't confuse her with Christopher Wray.
Thank you, sir. I apologize. I appreciate the correction, Tom. I stand corrected.
Not that he's any better, but just making the point.
In any case, Tom corrected me, and he's right. Secret Service Director. 9 days in, she doesn't have many answers. Tom and I both know that's just not possible, especially with today's ability to analyze forensic information, interviews, investigations, so on and so forth. But this is something I want you all to understand. Let me be clear. Until they properly staff this agency, this is going to happen again, because obviously 22 agents and their dependency upon local assets, which are great assets. Problem, they're not Secret Service agents. They're not mission driven. They don't understand the nuances. And I don't want to say they're half invested, but they really they defer to the Secret Service to kind of call everything, because that's how they are. The Secret Service come in and they're rather insistent that things be done the way they want them to be. Understandably so. There's some rub here until they bump up this organization's profile and manpower. And by the way, as I understand it, this Secret Service Director Cheadle was identified as saying, that they would like 30% to be women. How about we just start hiring the best people? Something else that was pointed out that Tom and I spoke to last week. You have to be able to body cover somebody. Tom and I are both big men. I guess we're about 6'1", Tom. Am I right? We still that tall? Or are we shrinking yet?
Trump's 6'4".
You're 6'4"?
So.
Oh, yeah. No, Trump is.
Trump is 6'4".
So here's your problem. You take someone, not gender specific, male or female, and you put him to cover Donald Trump at 5'6", 5'8", 5'9", even 5'10". You're behind the curve. This is not brain surgery, ladies and gentlemen. This is part of the mentality going on in the country today. We're so busy not trying to hurt people's feelings that we're putting people's lives at risk. That's the simple truth attached to this. This isn't going to change until they dramatically increase the number of Secret Service agents. Now, try making the job look a little better. There's the jurisdiction I'm familiar with in New York called Nassau County, another one, Suffolk County. You get hired by these agencies, it's like hitting the lottery. Literally, a lieutenant in New York City makes the same as a police officer in Nassau and Suffolk counties. Guess what? Kids want to go to be cops. And the work conditions are better. And you don't have people second guessing you on the level that they do in the city of New York. And the city of New York has an exceptional police department, especially all circumstances being considered. They have an incredible command staff, or at least they used to. They still have some great men up there, but believe me, the fish stinks from the head down. Their command staff is good, which I could bump into a conversation with Tom Fuentes about what's going on in the FBI and their command staff. But the point I'm trying to make, guys, why would anybody want to be a Secret Service agent? That's the problem. They have a major problem with retention, a major problem with hiring. Focus on fixing that, guys. Make this job more financially lucrative, less demanding on your personal lives. Maybe you'll attract some better clients. Who in God's name is running this country? And I have to say something to you. I'm not just pointing the finger at the Democrats. I'm pointing it at the Republicans. When Donald Trump came into office, realizing what was going on with his guys, you figure, we'll increase the Secret Service. Didn't happen. Nothing. Tell you the truth. I ran into Keith Schiller, who was running Donald Trump's security. Keith worked for me when he was a sergeant in the New York City Police Department. I ran into him on 56th Street between Madison and Fifth Avenues with my son. He was across the street at the Trump building. I said, "Hey, Keith, what's going on?" He walked over. You know what he said to me? He goes, "I can't wait till this ends. It is grueling." I said, "How are the Secret Service agents?" He said, "They're awesome." I go, "How are they holding up?" He goes, "I don't know. They're out here with us 2 or 3 weeks at a time." I said this last podcast. I'm going to keep saying it until you hear it. It may be good for your marriage to give it a little breathing room if it's a little tense, and, sometimes distance helps clear your head. Never good when you leave your children. Okay, you miss their ball games. The kids feel like you're not parenting them. They can't reconcile this craziness. Stop climbing up under the dress of the Secret Service like they caused this. This is systemic failure, period. Give me the Secret Service, not to run it, but to start to rebuild it to the scope and scale it needs to be, and you'll see a whole different mechanism put in place. But this is not going to change until you implement some of these ideas, one of them called staffing. You've got to make these jobs more attractive. Tom, without question, and this is my opinion, Tom, you better speak to this. It's the job to be on today, in my opinion. I've always felt that way about the FBI. I've always felt about the FBI then and now that at the end of the day, they'll be there to set the record straight. I know what happened with Strzok and McCabe and Lisa Page and Comey. I got the whole memo, but that's an infinitesimal percentage of the the FBI agents. There are about 12,000 FBI agents. Tom, am I correct?
Ballpark, 12,000, 13,000.
12,000. There's about 3,000.
Now, Lou, one of the things about this, and this would apply to Secret Service, you're talking about how long some of these people are deployed on certain missions, how long they're away from their family, their children, and all of that. Well, the FBI and the Secret Service, they can deploy as many people, they can rotate them. They have an unlimited ability to put any or all of those 12,000 agents at a particular venue. So we can go back. You can look at, other major advisory level. And we had the kidnapping of a young girl named Melissa Ackerman. Now, when that happened in, I think, May of 88, 7 or 8, I forget what year, but when that happened, that became what we would refer to as an office special. Anybody not running or involved in a very sensitive operation, you got assigned to work on that case. Now, that case, when that happened, agents that were free to be deployed for that case, they were assigned and they worked that for 3 or 4 months straight. Every day, 7 days a week. They missed weddings, graduations, birthdays of their kids, everything until, an arrest was made in that particular investigation. That's typical of an FBI special investigation when something big. So in this case, when you have a candidate with international threats against him, like Trump has with Iran threatening him, among others, that out of those X number of agents that Secret Service has, they can deploy and rotate as many as they want. They could have had 1,000 agents at that rally, and the following make 1,000 different agents at the next rally. So they're not stuck. If they're understaffed nationwide, that's true. But they were covering several rallies in Pennsylvania, 3 in Pennsylvania, and the G7 heads of state that came to Washington the week earlier. So, yeah, they're way understaffed for any event. But they're also in a position to bring agents from all over the world and put them at that event to beef up the staff.
But Tom,
they don't do it. That's a management issue,
Agreed.
not just how many personnel they have.
Agreed, Tom. You make a very good point. But once again, I come back and say to you, that's at the expense of the personal lives of these agents. And what Tom just said, he referenced something as special, a kidnapping. Police departments are the same way. You bump into a particular case, everything conventional in the way that you normally would address a criminal activity goes out the window. Tom just spoke to it. The sad part is this is their lives daily.
Nobody cares about their personal lives.
Tom, that's the whole point of this, though, Tom.
The divorce rate, but Tom, or how many of their kids commit suicide or go on drug. That's not an issue. They apply for the job, they get the job. That's the way it goes. Do your job.
You know what, Tom? And I hear what you're saying, but I go back and say, you're worried about why you can't have retention or why you can't recruit? We're talking to the problem. I hear what you're saying, Tom. I know this is a cold society. And as I said earlier, when a president or a vice president, I protected a cabinet member, Susan Schwab, dynamite lady. She had 2 agents assigned from the executive office of the president of the United States. We picked her up. When she left the country, Secret Service had her. The reality of it is this: they're overtaxing this agency in every capacity. There are some questions that are being asked right now about the use of drones. Tom pointed out something in the beginning of this discussion that you have to understand, and we're going to go off onto a tangent about gun control in one moment, because I've listened to these hearings for the first 4 hours, and they're trying to piggyback this with gun control, which is just a complete intentional misleading of the American public. The reality of the situation, guys, is this is not going to change until they change the way they manage this group. Period. End of discussion. I do want to talk to you about New York City, for example, when the president comes in, so you guys understand what's being given to him. About 2,000 cops. We close down roads, entrance ramps, exit ramps, overpasses. We create frozen zones that are blocks and blocks and blocks. The PD does it for them, by the way, and it's done under the supervision of the Secret Service. I know because I've been there. You come to 50th Street and Park Avenue, it's part of the frozen zone. It's blocked off by radio cars. There's a Secret Service agent there. I know that. You got to give these guys assets. And all I'm saying to you is everybody take a step back and let this be your wake-up call, because there's a problem here that goes well beyond how the Secret Service performed that day. Everybody keep your damn opinions to yourself. Stop critiquing them negatively. They've taken responsibility. But there's a much bigger discussion here as to how this happened, over and above the fact that we might have DEI, which if they're embracing that, then you're going to be a victim of your own device. Tom, I want to take you down this road of gun control right now, because I've listened to these hearings for 4 hours. Raskin opened up, this is about assault rifle bans. Guys, let me tell you the truth about this discussion. We just went to the 29th state, whether you agree with this or not, that embraces constitutional carry, which says, under the Second Amendment, in that state, Louisiana most recent, you may carry a concealed weapon without a permit. We in law enforcement, I don't want to speak for you, Tom, but everybody I've spoken to, and I know you'll give me your opinion, are against this. This is not about gun control. This is about managing a tool in our society, much like an automobile. We have more oversight and regulation with vehicles than we do with guns. I strongly embrace the Second Amendment today more than I ever have, because I see the direction this country's going. I see the division, the polarization. I see the threat. I listen to a man Tom's not fond of, Christopher Wray, but I think he will support his statement when he says the southern border of this country is a threat to our national security. We've got a fentanyl problem. We've allowed people into this country that are on the watch list that are known terrorists. This is the reality of it. And guys, while I'm saying that to you, you're defunding the police, you're dismantling police departments, as Omar's calling for in Minneapolis. Cops ain't showing up for you. Let's stop the bull. You took their pensions, you try to put them in jail. Nobody smart would go near the public. Do you understand what you've done here? I talk to people, residents on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, they asked me to come in and patrol the community, right? I said, you have the 20th precinct. Cops ain't rocking and rolling. I go, guess what? Maybe, you should support it. Oh, we support the police. Really? I didn't hear you. I didn't hear you support them. There's my accent, by the way. Guys, this is a big problem, but I want to talk about this gun control now. So Raskin and any number of other Democrat elected officials during these hearings are brushing up against the gun control. Guys, let me tell you the harsh reality of this gun problem. And Tom, I'd like you to come in on this in a second. First of all, we have no idea how many guns there are in this country. And I have to correct myself. Prior to 1968, it wasn't required that your serial number. I thought it was the 1940s. I was wrong. I thought I'd heard that. I went and researched it. It's the Gun Control Act of 1968. There's also a form you fill out, right? It's called the Federal Firearms Form, numbered 4473. Hunter Biden just got convicted of multiple felonies as a result of lying on it. After a certain window of time, they're all destroyed. Little known fact. We are manufacturing guns in the form of ghost guns as I'm sitting here on this podcast talking to Tom. They're talking about assault rifles. These firearms were allowed under the auspices of the government, the ATF, to be circulated to the general public during Vietnam. Cold firearms industry. We didn't have a problem with firearms, guys. We bumped into Columbine, which I believe was April 29th of 1998 or 99. It's 99, I believe. And that was our wake-up call. And by the way, they didn't have an assault weapon there. But I'm listening to them now get into this discussion about, gun legislation. I want to piggyback this incident and bring this into the conversation. We had over 100 shootings July 4th weekend in Chicago. You can't buy a gun in Chicago. Try this word called enforcement. Try boundaries, accountability. We don't have it anymore. That's right. Pritzker, who they talk about being the president potentially, signed the no bail reform, right? No cashless bail. Let me be more precise. Kind of like what we have in New York called bail reform. So if you're of indigent circumstance and you commit a crime, we're basically letting you go, even if you're a repeat violent felon or a bank stick-up man, which happens to be a fact that happened in New York City. Now, Tom, you're living in the same planet I'm in. What's this discussion about gun control again? You were a police officer. You're an FBI agent, 29 years. What's the remedy to the gun violence problem in the country, Tom? Independent of the mental health discussion. Go ahead.
Lock people up.
Voila.
Somebody commits a crime with a gun, they go away. That doesn't happen. Right now, we have people committing violent crime, citizens and migrants coming in, committing violent crime and pretty much getting away with it. Pretty much getting sent home that day or no bail. All of those issues that have made our cities, especially our biggest cities, unfortunately, run by Democrats, as being totally unsafe because there's no law enforcement. So you have citizens moving out because they can't defend themselves. You have businesses moving out because they can't stay. They can't stay in business. They can't make money without just being robbed blind or beat up or killed, whatever it might be. So that's the difference is that we have a flock of prosecutors all over the country in some of our biggest cities who are not going to enforce the law. They're not going to prosecute anybody. But now they will prosecute a police officer if they can, but they won't prosecute felons, especially if they're violent felons. They get away with it over and over and over.
But we will prosecute Donald Trump, and I'm not supporting Donald Trump. This is not an endorsement. But we'll go after a former president based on an alleged incident 16 years ago, which he supposedly paid hush money to, which we came to the realization that everybody does this to kill these stories. Catch and kill, they call them, the Inquirer. Boy, I got an education there too. Some very prominent people in our society, not necessarily celebrities, some of entertainers like Leonardo DiCaprio has had to utilize this service. I could see. All someone's got to do is make an allegation, and we have a demographic that will believe it, which goes back to me saying, why would you run for political office? Because if we can't find something bad to say about you, we'll just make something up. Some irresponsible media outlet will play it, and then we'll have a demographic sign on with it and then spread it around. But really what we're talking about here, guys, basic fundamental concepts of governing. Everybody right now, and we're going off onto another tangent, is talking about Biden stepping down and who's the guy that's going to go up against Trump. Guys, I'm not telling you who to vote for. Tom is more inclined to than I am at this juncture. I'm just saying one simple thing to you. Think about your children before you look through your political lens and marry on to this entity that's basically allowed your borders to go to hell in a handbasket. Your energy sector's gone to hell in a handbasket. Your foreign policy's gone to hell in a handbasket. Your overall economy's gone to hell in a handbasket. I don't know where to stop and start with this. Did I say the borders? If I did, I said it twice. And we've been warned by Christopher Ray, as I just said a moment ago, about this. This is about policy, not about people. I'm going to tell you this objectively speaking. I have never been anti-Democrat. It's not that I'm anti-Democrat now. I'm just gravely concerned because something has infiltrated their thinking that is unprecedented. And I could tell you how it got there, but it'll be unpopular. But it's the Obama administration. The guy with the silver tongue, who I voted for, and I can tell you why, legitimately why I voted for him, did nothing to help the minority community and fed the division, insinuated himself into local law enforcement issues, like one in Boston with his professor friend, not understanding the mechanism police employ to protect you from going into your home when we suspect someone's in there that could be a threat to you. Or Michael Brown's incident in St. Louis. Is that correct? It was Ferguson, Missouri, right? We decided the guilt of this cop before we even started due process. That's right. Due process is gone. Guys, I'm not here to tell you who to vote for, but I'm tired of listening to this thing about who's a threat to democracy. They want to kill your First Amendment rights. Look what they've done with social media. They're attacking your Second Amendment rights. We attack your due process, and that's not Republicans. I don't know who to tell you to vote for at this point, at this juncture, but don't go to the polls going like, Kamala Harris or Gavin Newsom, who's a pathological liar, and I don't like contention, but you need to know how dangerous this man is. I've had a home in California. I live there. They run businesses and the middle class out of there as I'm on this podcast with you right now. I've heard him say corporations come there to flourish. That's a bold-faced lie. They're leaving in record numbers as their citizens are. You can't afford to live there, own a business there, or work there. And we're talking about this guy becoming the president. And I got to tell you something. They have people on the Democrat side in their bullpen that happen to be good people. Of course, we don't get to hear from them because they decided to hand this to Joe Biden without challenge. They even wouldn't give Robert Kennedy a chance to speak. And I got to be honest, I'm not saying vote for Robert Kennedy. I just wanted to hear what he had to say. We were denied that privilege that we have. If you want to start talking about who's harming the country, put your political lens down and look at what it costs you to go to a supermarket today. By the way, if you want to know why your supermarket prices have gone up, it's not because General Mills is gouging. When you double the price of diesel fuel and your products are delivered by trucks, and those diesel fuel driving truck operators have to pay more money for their fuel, they pass it to the consumer and to the people that are supplying the commodities to you. Stop insulting the American public. I keep telling you, this is how little they think about us. This is our political environment right now. Biden has stepped away. They really don't want Kamala Harris, who finished. She polled less than 2% in the primaries. This was a DEI appointment. He said, I'm gonna choose a female. How about you just choose the best person, regardless of gender, regardless if they're straight or gay, black or white, their religion. Try this one on for size, folks. This is the best of people who are running the country off for us, Tom. I mean, you got to have an opinion on this, Tom. I mean, as to what we're doing politically today.
No, I agree. The whole woke philosophy, DEI, and all of that. When you've taken away meritocracy, you don't have to be the best. You don't have to be the most competent. You don't have to be anything competent, let's say, or good. And you put people in because of their sex or race or whether they're trans or not. So, and you look at the administration, let's say, look at every cabinet office that's running, a major department of the government. Let's start with transportation. Buttigieg. Well, he married a guy and they adopted a baby and he took months of maternity leave. They have the big train wreck in East Palestine, Ohio. The whole town is devastated. And where's the head of the Department of Transportation? We have airplanes with doors falling off in flight. Where is that? You have all of these issues with that department. Look at the leadership of the Department of Transportation. Then go right down the line. Look at the Department of the military. Look at that. With the way we left Afghanistan, you have generals disobeying the president. No, we're not going to get our stuff out. We're just going to leave it. Let the Taliban have $85 billion. Let the Americans that are still in the country be stuck there. The Afghans that helped our government. No, we don't need to get them out, even though they'll be killed as soon as we leave. And then we have 13 of our own military people killed on our way out the door. another fiasco. We're giving away all of the ammunition that supposedly is for Ukraine and all of that. So you have Secretary of Defense Austin a couple of weeks ago visit the CEOs of every major defense company and say, can't you go to 24/7 protection? We're running out of bullets. We're running out of 105 millimeter artillery. We're running out of all these things. We've given them away to Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. And they tell him, no, some of this equipment is handmade by technicians. It's very technical. It's not like the old days. We can't do it. If we're going to do it, it'll take us a year and a half or more to even gear up to produce that stuff and then make it. So that's a failure. And they had to know that was coming as we're giving away all this military equipment. But go right down the line. Department of Energy, Department of Education, all of these departments are misrun. They're run by incompetents who at least they meet the DEI qualifications. That's all that matters.
And that's what's pervasive in the culture today. You know, guys, if you want to fix these problems, you know, I'm not the smartest guy on the planet, but the one thing I've done my whole life, and I suspect Tom has been guilty of this too, is fix things. I know Tom did that extensively in the FBI, just understanding a little bit about how complex it could be. Tom's not the only friend I have who's a former assistant director or SAC, special agent in charge of a field office. I've got quite a number of them. The bottom line here, guys, is that, you know, I'm not concerned about Republicans more than Democrats. I'm concerned for the country as a whole. That's it. If somebody perpetrates a terrorist incident because we have a weak link in our governmental chain, he's not going to discern between who's a Republican, who's a Democrat, who allowed him into the country and who didn't. I don't know what they're thinking about today. I don't know what happened to the Democrats, that they spew anti-Semitism, Tlaib, Omar, Jayapal, just to start with a few. Or the fact that Blumenthal, Schiff, Nadler, Schumer, you never hear the outrage with anti-Semitism coming from their side of the aisle. Guys, what's going on here? What happened to the Democrats? I'm not telling you who to vote for. I'm telling you, think about your children when you do go to vote. Look at the condition and the trajectory of this country right now and ask yourself who's going to lead you into the future. And I hate to break it to you, it isn't Kamala Harris or Gavin Newsom. Believe me when I tell you, you need a far more moderate, truth-telling individual to, I would say, mend the fence a little bit, kind of like what we witnessed with Bill Clinton in his second administration with Newt Gingrich and a Republican House. This is doable. This isn't even the Democrat Party of Bill Clinton. I don't know what's going on here. And I didn't get on this podcast today to bash the Democrats. I got on here to tell you the truth because we need a course correction with this country and we need one with the Democrats. But I can't get over the hypocrisy. Where's Chuck Schumer running his mouth when they're spewing anti-Semitism? And I have a load of Jewish friends that have been great supporters of mine on a multitude of levels. I am loyal to them. I support them. We have people that are Palestinian in this country, which is a Muslim religion. We don't want to talk about the fact there's a lack of compatibility between Islam and Western civilization. That's a simple, sad truth. And for everyone that's come here that is Muslim, all you got to do is modify your beliefs a little bit so you become part of this many, u pluribus unum, out of many one. Not that you're going to come out here and sail your own ship and hope it doesn't bump into the Western world agenda. And if you think I'm the only person thinking this way, go talk to the head of Czechoslovakia or Hungary or Poland. They won't let them in because of lack of compatibility. Now you have Sweden want them out of Sweden. The Irish want them out of Ireland. The Germans are panicked now because we extended this branch. Guys, you need to go in and do a little more of an in-depth study about what this religion is really about. And all I'm saying is simply this. If you come here to become part of this great culture, you might have to surrender some of these customs or mores that you embrace so tightly because they're in direct contradiction. Nobody treats women, not Donald Trump and not even Hollywood, as poorly as Middle Eastern men. I know this because I've worked in that environment extensively for at least 30 years, longer, 35 years at least. I see how they manage them. I've read stories about it. Nothing like that isn't factually driven. It's horrifying. You know, it'd be nice if we could usher them into a new generation of thinking here. That's part of the exercise also, to change the thinking. And we're seeing it happen a little bit in the Middle East. But all this bumps into this political agenda. I mean, stop lying to the American public. Guys, the truth of the story is and Tom will probably support this. We have no idea how many illegal immigrants came across the border. What I find interesting is we only reference to the encounters at the southern border. How about all the people that overstay their visas, which is the largest number of individuals that violate our immigration laws? Or the northern border, which is in crisis right now in Vermont and Maine. You don't hear these numbers because it doesn't fit their narrative. If you're not insulted by the multitude of times Kamala Harris and this individual Mayorkas have told you the border is secure, that's how little they think of you. They have absolutely no regard. They seem to think they have this divine right to, and that was thunder, ladies and gentlemen, this divine right to just lead us blindly down this path. We have an obligation to this country as a whole, not a political party, and most importantly, our children. Tom, I want to go into this whole discussion about the Ukraine once again, because as we're talking about funding the Secret Service appropriately to make the job more attractive, change their pension system, put it back in Treasury, and leave them the hell alone because no one has a law enforcement obligation on the level that they do. But we're funneling money as we're sitting here talking into the Ukraine. Am I not right, Tom?
Yeah, we've been funneling money. That may change now with Biden when he leaves office, because Biden is beholden to the Ukraine for the millions of dollars in corrupt money they gave him and gave his son and gave his brother and other members of the family. That level of corruption has been documented in books and articles. Peter Schweitzer and his investigative team have well documented the corruption of the Biden family, not just from Ukraine and some of the nearby countries to Ukraine, but China as well, and the tens of millions of dollars they've received from China, helping Biden decide to go soft on many of the policies against China. But the Ukraine is a complete corrupt operation. It's been the most corrupt country in Europe for decades, and nothing's changed. Their leadership, Zelensky and others, are just rich. They've stolen much of the money that we've given them. They know how much money they've given to Biden and his family, and that's why they have Biden and have had Biden by the throat for all these years, because they could threaten to reveal and provide the documentation, the evidence, you name it, to show the corruption of the Biden family, and that's been the threat. So when they want something, Biden would give it to them. Now with Biden no longer going to be in power, let's see what happens to that level of corruption and support from some of these countries. It's going to be a big issue. We'll see what happens.
And interesting that you've interjected the president's name currently, because they've suddenly realized he isn't fit to run for president, but he's still holding the office. But I want to go back onto something interesting about the debates with Donald Trump, because I listened to them. I wasn't impressed with either one of them. It was like the lesser of evils. I thought Donald Trump could have driven some points home much more fervently. But at one point, the president referred to Donald Trump as a felon, and I want Tom, you to jump in on this, because this is really more your world. The special prosecutor, Robert Hur, stated that he committed numerous felonies, knowingly and intentionally mishandling classified information, giving it to ghostwriters and publishers for his book, of which he got an $8 million advance on. I don't know why Trump didn't come back and say to him, at least I have the cognitive skills to be prosecuted, to be able to embrace the judicial process. Biden is going to get a complete pass on this. And what they're accusing Donald Trump of, or they have, as to what went on in Mar-a-Lago, is nothing compared to what Biden did as the vice president. Be not confused about this, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm going to let Tom take you down this road, because this is a man that managed a SCIF. He'll talk to you about what a SCIF is and the boundaries in which you may participate in attending this environment. But this is what Robert Hur said about Biden. And Biden had the audacity to refer to Trump as a felon, or to call him an alley cat, because he allegedly 16 years ago got involved with Stormy Daniels. In my opinion, with Stormy Daniels, if he did commingle with her, we should have impeached him for bad taste, to be honest with you. But since when does your personal life take this scope and scale? I mean, we should have learned that from Bill Clinton. You can't allow their personal lives to intersect with how they perform in their job, because Bill Clinton is actually a brilliant guy, contrary to the fact I don't think much of him as a human being. Oh, yeah, by the way, Donald Trump's a pig when he deals with women, but Bill Clinton isn't, right? Or John Edwards, or who was the guy, it'll come to me, with the boat, help me, Tom, if you can. Funny something was the boat. In any case, you know, we have these different sets of rules for different people. Guys, please take this from me. I have worked in an industry that is extremely high profiled, right? With the people I protect. They're all the same. Not all of them. I shouldn't say that. A large number of them are the same. When you start pointing your finger at Donald Trump about objectifying women, please take a close look at the entertainment industry, because no one objectifies women more than the entertainment industry. You can't advance your career until you take your top off. If you really want to hit the ball out of the box, take your clothes off in totality. Guys, I've been there. I ran the Academy Awards. I ran the Globes 14 years. I worked for the AFI, the Writers Guild, the Directors Guild. I worked all of these events. And that's a simple truth. So if you want to point the finger, kind of like what we were talking about the Secret Service, let's really go to the big picture, this cultural deficiency we have. By the way, Playboy, Penthouse, Hustler. Why are you talking about Playboy? I was in LA, living in LA. The Playboy Mansion was in full swing, and everybody was in there, including the hypocrites that pointed Donald Trump for being an objectifier of women. Guys, you know what? Let's try to just make this simple. Let's try to just start embracing the truth here. Guys, we're going to take a quick break. Tom and I are going to come back to you. We're going to further this conversation. I hope you find what we're saying is interesting. Tom and I do not want you to be spoon-fed by us. Feel free to fact check us. I really encourage you to do that. This is an exercise about changing the conversation in this country. We're trying to expand this platform so it goes beyond the podcast, which has a limited audience. We need to just change the thinking in this country and start to make people understand it's okay, we're different, guys. Other people's personal lives are not your business unless they intersect with you. In a negative way, I might note, not just because arbitrarily you bump into it. You got to stop holding on so tight here. Relax and try to enjoy this journey. It's short. It's fleeting. I don't know what Tom's experiences were, but I had a young man die in my hands holding his head. I've seen things in law enforcement and outside of law enforcement, just growing up in New York, that would horrify you. It's why I kind of relax and I compartmentalize and really let me give you a chuckle. I went to the doctor about a week or two ago. My blood pressure was 110/70 and my heart rate was 55. That's called compartmentalizing is what it is. Excuse me. Okay. I let everything roll off my back. You got to learn to let it go. You got to relax out here, but you also have to embrace the truth independent of your politics. We're going to be right back. Tom and I will be right back. This is Operation Truth. OperationTruthOfficial.com is how you can correspond with us. And we're going to continue this conversation.
Thank you for tuning in to Operation Truth. We are just taking a moment to remind you to go follow us at Operation Truth Official on TikTok. You can also find us at Operation Truth Official on Facebook and Instagram. Be a part of this conversation and join the operation.
We're back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Operation Truth. With me, as always, is Tom Fuentes, my cohort, my co-conspirator, my co-host. Tom, you know, what I've observed after this attempt on the attempted assassination of Donald Trump was a lot of interesting rhetoric, which begs a question regarding the threat level associated with him and the agenda of anybody in this society, maybe a group, an individual, a political mechanism, the media, whomever, that might really be intent on taking this guy out of the picture. Now, I mentioned to you in prior conversation that I've listened to a staff member of a congressman make comments about you missed, you should work on your shooting. Some other people in the media have made comments like this, which is pretty disgusting and it indicts this country, period. So, you know, what's your feelings, Tom, in regards to the threat level with this guy, meaning Trump?
Well, I think that, you know, we'll use their own words. The progressive left, I won't even say Democrats, but many of them are, has been saying for a long time now, more than a couple of years, that whatever it takes, we have to keep Donald Trump from returning to the White House, no matter what it takes. So initially it was, well, let's just take them off the ballots in all these states. Then the Supreme Court rules 9-0. No, you can't do that. Well, then they decide, well, we use lawfare. We'll bring up every stupid invented charge in many cases to prosecute him on. And, hopefully he'll be looking at, hundreds of years in prison, and we'll get him that way. And then systematically, all of these cases are falling apart. Even the documents case in Florida, where the judge says, you know what, Jack Smith, he's not a legal prosecutor. He didn't go through the normal process to be a special prosecutor. He wasn't already a U.S. attorney or nominated or confirmed Judiciary Committee and then by the Senate. He just gets appointed by Merrick Garland and off he goes. And they're saying that's not right. So then you look at all these other cases, the New York cases, the Atlanta case, which is falling apart. So the only thing where he's got the 34 convictions, every legal scholar that talks about it says they're not going to stand. There were so many constitutional violations in that prosecution that it won't stand.
Tom.
So now you have.
I have a question for you, Tom, more directly. You're a former assistant director of the FBI with a very intimate knowledge of the workings of this government. And there's a term floating around referencing the deep state. Do you have concerns, Tom, that this isn't the end of the conversation as far as attempting to assassinate Donald Trump? What's your feeling on that?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say.
Well, get there.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Oh, sorry to go into all these facts. So you have the lawfare, all these prosecutions. Well, this will keep him in jail. He won't be able to run. He won't be able to this or that. That backfires. And even though he got the 34 convictions, they're not going to stand. And everybody pretty much knows they're not going to stand. So now several people have been saying now in the last 6 months for sure that they've tried everything to keep him out of the White House and nothing has worked. Nothing shows any indication of a promise that it's going to keep him from being reelected. There's only one other answer. The real deep state, way deep down, is going to have to commit a coup and kill Donald Trump. That's the only next answer for them. So now you look at the attempt in Pennsylvania over last weekend, some of these kind of events. Okay, they made these attempts, but it's not over. And you've been talking the first part of this podcast about how understaffed the Secret Service is. They can't hire enough people. Nobody wants to be a Secret Service agent and be away from their family months at a time. Well, all of that's true. But if they're not in the position, and by the way, this is not the first time they've come under this. You may not remember this, but during John F. Kennedy's presidency, Bobby Kennedy tried to get the law changed so that the responsibility to protect the president, his brother at the time, would go to the FBI and be taken away from the Secret Service.
What was the rationale behind that, Bob? What was the rationale behind that, Tom?
Because he felt that they lacked discipline, that there were all these reports that the night before the president was going to make a public appearance, they were out drinking and chasing women and doing, things like that, showing up hungover. And there was a lot of testimony that even on the day of Kennedy's assassination, many of them had been drinking all night in Fort Worth, came over and were still hungover the morning of November 22nd.
Tom, but can I just say one thing about that? I just want to say one thing about that, though. That I've heard that before, and I also believe it isn't what you know, it's what you can prove. And those are very serious allegations that Tom just made. I have not heard a single person who witnessed the Secret Service drinking the night before come forward and say, I was out there drinking with them. And maybe you have, Tom, but
Yeah, I have. There were reports of that. A couple of them lost their badges. I think one lost his gun. Yeah, there were a number of reports of that. Now, what happens is when the president gets killed and Johnson creates the Warren Commission to try to whitewash the whole thing and be able to pin the whole entire thing on Lee Harvey Oswald, just to make sure they put Alan Dulles in charge of helping the Warren Commission, running the investigation. And Dulles had been fired by Kennedy and hated him with a passion. But he gets put in charge of the investigation of what was going on. So there was no further investigation of what the Secret Service did or didn't do on the day of the assassination.
Interesting, Tom.
That's a whole different topic. I don't know, if you don't want to get into it, that's fine. I'm just saying the reputation of the Secret Service has not always been stellar, much like the FBI. It hasn't always been
Same
stellar
through local
either.
law enforcement,
So
Tom.
you've had these agencies from a PR standpoint go up and down. But, where we're at now, this idea that the Secret Service is understaffed and that's why Trump didn't get enough protection, nonsense. He didn't get enough protection because the director of Secret Service didn't want to give him enough.
Well, that's a big
They
statement,
could transfer in agents from all over the country. They could have had 300 agents in Pennsylvania protecting him. They didn't. They didn't have drones in the sky. They didn't have helicopters. They didn't have the staffing. They didn't have any of what they really needed. And all those deficiencies came to light in the attempted shooting of Donald Trump.
Are you suggesting, Tom, lightly I might note, that we've politicized or weaponized the Secret Service potentially as we did the FBI?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I sincerely hope that isn't the case. I unfortunately have to believe it's a possibility because in listening to the first 4 hours of the testimony of the Secret Service director, she was having a really difficult time. 9 days into an investigation, you have more answers than she seemed to be able to provide, absent of identifying individuals by name. I do think there is an importance to try to identify, is the Secret Service suffering from DEI like everybody else is? I suspect that they are.
Actually, Lou, in fairness to her, and a lot of people aren't aware of this, the law designates Secret Service to be responsible for the protection of president, vice president, members of Congress in our country, and any head of state that visits the United States. They're also responsible. Now, deputy ministers from other countries are the responsibility of the State Department. The police that protect our embassies and consulates, but the actual person in charge of that country, like we'll see this week with Netanyahu coming to the United States, that's the responsibility of the Secret Service. And now, if the protectee gets harmed, attacked, and actually killed, the responsibility for conducting the investigation of that FBI by law. So right now, a lot of what they're answering, or what they're asking her and pouncing on her, 9 days, you should have every answer. Her only answer has to be call the FBI. They're running this investigation.
Tom, I tell you why I don't buy into this, and I don't want to arbitrate it with you because I have to yield. You have a lot more intimate knowledge regarding the mechanism. But I find it hard to believe that the Secret Service doesn't have more information, fruition of which is the FBI investigation. And I know what you're talking about there, Tom.
No, I agree 100%.
There's something not right here, buddy.
The question needs to go to Christopher Wray, which supposedly, I think Wednesday, he's supposed to testify. The FBI is running the investigation, top to bottom, in and out. Now, how much they, collaborate with her and other officials, yeah, no question. They'd have to be interviewing her in detail about the decision she made. Who'd she put in charge? Who's that person? How many agents did she transfer TDY, temporary duty, to come into Pennsylvania to be at that rally? Given that she was already protecting Jill Biden at another Pennsylvania location, Kamala Harris at another Pennsylvania, and still probably some lingering heads of state from the G7 still in the United States. So yeah, but she's not running the investigation into this thing. She should know, she should be involved, but she's technically not in charge of the investigation.
Guys, we're going to have to wrap it today on that note. I do want to go back and revisit the Kennedy assassination in a much broader sense with Tom, because as you probably have learned from prior podcasts, Tom is also an historian and has a really interesting perspective on that assassination, what drove it, who was intimately involved in it, and what it kind of triggered moving forward with this country, the loss of its innocence, and the understanding of the military-industrial complex. Guys, this has been Operation Truth Official.com is how you find us, by the way. My name is Lou Palumbo. This is Tom Fuentes, and we're signing off from Operation Truth. Thank you for joining us today. And please be looking on YouTube and the other vehicles out there to find our podcast. Thank you, guys.